Everyone says to choose your enemies carefully, but also choose your friends carefully, because they can become enemies. This is a story about a friendship between women that ended very tragically. The protagonist of today's case is Renae Marsden from Sydney, Australia. She grew up with her 3 siblings in the family of Teresa and Mark Marsden. There was always a warm atmosphere in her home, but Renae was particularly close to her mother. They had a wonderful relationship, and Teresa described her daughter as a very kind, cheerful, and loving girl. In 2010, Renae turned 18. At that time, she worked in a hair salon as a foreman and administrative assistant. In the salon, she met a man named Angus, who also worked there. At first, they didn't notice each other, but then Angus realized he had fallen in love. It took him a long time to muster the courage to approach the girl and tell her about his feelings, until he discovered that Renae had feelings for him too. Within a few weeks, they became inseparable, and 2 months later, they made plans for their future life together. But soon, their relationship came to an unexpected and heartbreaking end. One day, Renae received a message from Angus. He wrote that he had only been using her all those months and often had a wild desire to sleep with other women. At that moment, Renae's world turned upside down. A measured life, plans for the future, and happy moments all seemed so insignificant to the betrayed girl that she just wanted to disappear somewhere. She stopped going outside, stopped eating, and was ready to spend days under the covers. In high school, Renae had a friend named Camila Zeidan. Because each had their own private life, the girls spent most of their time apart. But when Camila found out about the trouble in Renae's relationship with her boyfriend, she dropped everything and rushed to cheer her up and support her through her grief. Camila advised her to just spend time with other guys. She even had a suitable candidate for her. Camila said she knew a man she believed would be good for Renae and could help her forget about Angus. It was Braden Spiteri. He was once Camila's friend, but their relationship didn't work out because they weren't compatible. However, she was 100% sure that Renae and Braden were meant for each other. She didn't mind her friend dating Braden because she couldn't find a better partner. At first, Renae refused to meet anyone. She didn't want to look at guys at all, but as the initial pain of the breakup subsided, she decided to give Braden a chance. Thus began their phone romance. From the first message, Renae felt incredibly close to this man. She hadn't seen him in person yet, but she already felt that invisible connection you get when you meet a soulmate. They constantly texted each other on social media, exchanging countless messages day and night. Braden was 23 years old. He was a graduate of an exclusive royal school and came from a wealthy family that owned a profitable construction business. When Renae told her mother Teresa about Braden, she was incredibly happy. He seemed perfect to her. There were many commonalities between them, and the young man wanted everything from life that Renae herself dreamed of. The only downside was that Braden was always busy. When it came to dating, he didn't refuse to meet, but he always had an excuse for why they couldn't spend time together. In January 2012, a few weeks after their relationship began, Renae went on a 2-week family cruise. During this trip, she had no cell service at all, so she was out of range for a while. As soon as she returned home, she received devastating news from Braden. Long ago, a man and his close friend were involved in a serious motorcycle accident. The friend didn't survive. Braden was driving the motorcycle. Investigations revealed that he was negligent and inattentive as a driver, so he was charged with negligent homicide. During the proceedings and court hearings, he couldn't tell her about it. He was afraid that this would upset the girl he liked. But now that he had been sentenced to 2 years in prison, he couldn't keep her in the dark. Renae was devastated by this terrible news, but still decided to continue the relationship. After Braden was arrested and put behind bars at the Goulburn Correctional Center, he was allowed to use a phone. Braden and Renae resumed contact, and the messages reached a new level. They couldn't talk on the phone and only exchanged messages because he told her he risked losing phone privileges if he was caught talking. As for visits, he waived that right to shorten his sentence and try to be released by Renae's 21st birthday. He dreamed of celebrating this event with his girlfriend. Renae was compromising, at least for the moment. She believed that 2 years would pass unnoticed, and then they would marry, and nothing could separate them. For the sake of a future together, she could endure some restrictions, because now it was about overcoming this short, difficult time. Although Spiteri was behind bars, they spent a lot of time online discussing their wedding, honeymoon, and what life would be like after their marriage. Renae even reached out to the consulate to ensure that Braden could travel abroad for their honeymoon despite his criminal record. In turn, Braden found opportunities to send her flowers and gifts to make her happy. He fully understood how difficult it was for her to cope without physical contact, so he offered her to satisfy her intimate needs, not with other men, but with his best friend Camila. He had no objection to Renae's contact with the girl and would even be happy if she took up his offer. But Renae categorically refused this idea, saying she would simply wait for him to come home. The same couldn't be said about Camila. She seemed very interested in the topic of intimacy with Renae. The friend constantly asked for details of the correspondence with Braden, inquired how she was dealing with her physical needs, and sometimes became very intrusive. Camila called several times a day. If Renae didn't answer, she bombarded her with hundreds of messages. Strangely, she became jealous of Renae's other friends. Even if the girl spent the entire day with her mother, Teresa, Camila would complain. One night, she called Renae 54 times. The next morning, Renae answered her and said that she was being very possessive and it was going beyond all reasonable limits. Instead of apologizing for disturbing her, Camila showed up at Renae's house and began to scold and attack her. Truly rude and unpleasant things came out of Zeidan's mouth, things Camila never expected to hear from someone she considered her best friend. After a verbal tirade, Camila suddenly stepped forward and tried to kiss Renae on the lips. But Renae rejected this intimacy, as she was only physically attracted to men. Camila didn't give up. She somehow persuaded her friend to have a physical relationship with her, after which Renae talked to her mother, Teresa, and said they had experimented. Renae was once again convinced that same-sex love wasn't for her, and hurried to tell Camila. After this incident, the friends decided to leave everything as it was and forget about the event. But despite everything, Zeidan continued to act strangely. Renae even showed her mother several emails from Camila, in which she expressed her unwavering love and desire to be together. The friend wrote that Renae wouldn't escape her feelings, and that no one would love her more than Camila. Camila promised to become one with Renae and follow her everywhere if she rejected her. Renae would eventually become her steady girlfriend. Teresa listened to her daughter's revelations and was worried. In an emotional outburst, some people could do terrible things out of love and then regret it. Therefore, she advised her daughter to end the friendship without giving reasons for the breakup. The woman assured her that Camila would calm down over time, find a young man, and forget her fantasies. But Renae wasn't ready to stop everything all at once. Then Teresa asked her to at least be very careful. When Renae had no choice but to end their decades-long friendship to protect her peace, Camila literally lost her mind. She became cruel and nervous but still kept in touch with Renae. At first, Renae simply ignored her. Over the next week, her relationship with Braden also began to strain because he often talked about Camila and tried to persuade his friends to reconcile. After his persistent persuasion, Renae even made several attempts to break up with him. But every time she ended her relationship with Spiteri, something tragic happened in his life, and he turned to her for help. The kind Renae felt sorry for the guy who had suffered so many misfortunes at once and returned every time. At first, the friend said his mother had a brain tumor. This was a blow to him because he couldn't be near her at that moment. On another occasion, he was attacked in prison and seriously injured. Just as Renae felt that Braden was becoming toxic and was ready to denounce it, something had to happen. Each time, her parents convinced their daughter to end the relationship with this man, or at least not refuse to date and communicate with other men who showed her attention. They hoped she would leave him forever as soon as the bond with Braden weakened. To atone for his guilt, Braden even contacted her parents several times to convince them that he was truly suitable for their daughter and had the best intentions for Renae. He continued to send love messages to his girlfriend and urged her to reconcile with Camila and ultimately forgive her. It worked. Renae reconnected with the only person who had always supported her relationship with Braden. 3 months into their relationship, the incredibly in-love Renae went to a tattoo studio with her best friend as moral support and got Spiteri's name tattooed on the right side of her chest. One afternoon, Renae's mother Teresa was browsing social media and came across a photo posted by her daughter's ex-boyfriend, Angus. She liked the photo and left a reaction without hesitation. Somehow, Braden noticed Teresa's activity and concluded that she did it deliberately to reconcile Angus with Renae. He sent her a very angry, rude message saying she had betrayed him and was a useless mother because she didn't support her daughter's feelings for Spiteri. He was actually furious and said many nasty things. After this incident, Renae's parents' feelings towards her boyfriend only worsened. They considered him rude and arrogant. No matter how hard their daughter tried to reconcile, Teresa remained persistent. A few months later, her mother agreed to talk to Braden. She offered him a compromise, to give Renae freedom at least until his release from prison. If her feelings didn't cool during this time, Teresa would change her attitude towards him. Surprisingly, the young man agreed. He told Renae that he still loved her and was determined to marry her as soon as he was released, but would give her complete freedom for now. The girl took this opportunity and soon started dating her colleague, Ian. Renae's parents were pleased that Ian was not like Braden. He had good manners and knew how to behave. They already hoped everything had changed. But Spiteri, who closely followed Renae's life, immediately noticed changes in her. He learned about Ian and started terrorizing the guy online to scare him away from his girlfriend, whom he had freed. Renae asked Braden to stop texting her, but eventually resumed regular communication at the friendship level. Renae quietly continued her relationship with Ian, thinking she had sorted everything out with Spiteri. In October 2012, she went on a business trip and was photographed in a hotel room next to a mirror. She later uploaded the photo to social media. She didn't expect this photo to elicit a reaction from Braden. He noticed a pair of men's shoes in the background and flew into a delusional rage, accusing her of cheating. Renae had to restore order again to maintain the friendship, explaining that they were Ian's shoes. But Spiteri didn't calm down. He somehow got the guy's number and started threatening him. Despite all his attempts to ruin his girlfriend's life, Renae and Ian got engaged on New Year's Eve. Now, constant contact with the ex was a big problem, and Ian informed his fiancée and gave her an ultimatum, either him or Braden. The time for the man's release was gradually approaching. It was supposed to happen in the fall of 2013. Renae knew about it and weighed the pros and cons for a long time, but in the end, she chose the love of her life, Braden. They started working together again to restore their relationship, but everything was very difficult. The girl was tormented by emotional swings. Braden said his father was pressuring him to take over the family's multi-million-dollar construction business once he was free, but that was not what he wanted to do with his life at all. When Renae asked him to at least listen to his father and think about this together, the man accused her of greed, claiming she was only with him for financial reasons and didn't care about his mental and emotional well-being. Moreover, he constantly blamed her for her relationship with Ian, calling her unfaithful and trying to make her feel guilty every time. This toxicity paralyzed Renae, but within minutes, Braden would switch and become a very loving and caring person again. In the summer of 2013, Camila went on a family trip to the USA, and Renae took this opportunity to finally end her friendship with her. For the girl, it was easier to do this from a distance. Lately, Zeidan had become extremely intrusive again, using her old tricks of being defiant and possessive towards Renae. Renae was already beginning to fear her friend. So as soon as Camila landed in the USA, she received a message from Renae asking her never to bother her again and to act like strangers if they met. Before his upcoming parole hearing, Braden told Renae that he couldn't communicate with her for a month. She had just broken up with her best friend Camila and now had to live another month without Braden. The girl was very lonely all these weeks. She continued to send him emotional and loving text messages, hoping to get a response someday. Renae tried to be patient and wait quietly. When the response finally came, the lovesick girl was surprised by the tone of the message. Braden was very brief and rude. Later that evening, Teresa, Renae's mother, received another message from Spiteri telling her to take care of her daughter's suicide threat. The alarmed woman hurried to ask her daughter about it. Renae said that her relationship with him was finally over, but there was no need to worry. She didn't want to hurt herself. When her mother tried to find out the details, the daughter said that she now knew who Braden was. She assured Teresa once again that everything was fine and she had no reason to worry. Then she got dressed to go out with friends later and left her home in Glebe Harbor. On August 5, 2013, at 5:49 p.m., Renae sent a very long and loving text message to her mother, telling her she loved her and asking for forgiveness. Teresa immediately dialed her daughter's number, but Renae didn't answer. Then the woman called Camila to find out what was going on, even though they hadn't communicated recently. Camila also received a similar message. She suggested that Teresa search for her daughter in a place where she thought Renae might go. The two went to the house where Zeidan said Braden's sister lived, but no one was there. After that, Teresa contacted the police to report her daughter missing. After some time, the police found Renae's car in Watson Bay, an area outside the city. Inside were an old phone she hadn't used in the last 2 months, a Valentine's card from Braden, and a collage of several photos of him. "I love you, Braden," was written on the dirty car window with a finger. Renae's parents, along with several close family members, started searching for Renae. They stumbled upon a pair of the girl's black ballet shoes. At that moment, the police cordoned off the search area and persuaded the family to go home and wait for the results with their loved ones. Teresa couldn't just sit idly by. She tried to contact Braden, but he didn't answer the phone or read the text messages the angry Teresa sent, convinced that he had somehow contributed to her daughter's disappearance. The girl's father then called the correctional facility where Spiteri was supposedly being held, but there were no records of an inmate by that name. These records were nowhere to be found. Mark immediately reported his concerns to the police. When the officers first searched the Watson Bay area, they didn't find Renae but found video footage of her last moments. Alone, the girl walked the path leading to the edge of the cliff, jumped over the barrier, and looked down. She then took out her phone, sent the last 3 texts, threw it into the sea, and then jumped herself. Her body was never found. Overwhelmed by sudden grief, the family didn't immediately realize that Renae was most likely dead. Her parents were determined to get answers and find out who she had been communicating with and about what recently. As it turned out, Renae had sent Braden a total of 91 text messages before she even left the house to go to Watson Bay. But the guy remained stubbornly silent. Only when Renae took off her shoes and prepared to jump did she receive a reply. Investigators examining Renae's phone records noticed a strange pattern in the messages from Camila and Braden. Their sudden mood swings were almost identical. When Camila was cruel to Renae, Braden was inexplicably angry at the girl and vice versa. In happy moments, Braden was also incredibly sweet. Although these messages came from 2 different phone numbers, they actually came from the same person. This meant that Braden Spiteri was actually a fictional character created by Camila. One of the last messages on Renae's phone was from Braden, stating that he needed a break and was ending their relationship after 18 long months. Renae's colleagues witnessed her emotional breakdown. She began to shake. Tears flowed and she could hardly speak. After calming down a bit, Renae picked up the phone and called Braden in prison for 92 seconds, according to outgoing call records. After the police obtained a search warrant, they searched Camila's house. Officers found several mobile phones, a torn letter to Braden, and another letter to Camila thanking her for introducing her to the love of her life and promising to repay her somehow. They also found a photo of the man, presumably Braden, whose real name was Cameron, but he was not the same person Renae had corresponded with for a year and a half. It was a photo of a random guy who had no idea his identity was being used for a virtual romance. Renae spent the last 18 months of her life believing she was in love, but on the day of her death, she realized Braden wasn't real. Camila admitted she had deceived her best friend by posing as Braden, but since there were no laws in New South Wales at the time prohibiting this, the police had nothing to charge her with. She hadn't extorted money from Renae to prosecute her for fraud. Everything she did was for her own pleasure. In 2020, Renae's parents convinced the authorities to investigate their daughter's death and find out how Camila directly contributed to it. Camila was granted immunity in exchange for details of her deception. Camila, who got away with her actions, claimed that she and Renae were in love, and since the Marsden family would never accept this relationship, they created the character Zeidan together as a cover for their relationship. Camila also insisted she had no idea about Renae's desire to commit suicide, but those close to the deceased girl believed that ending the relationship between Zeidan and Renae was just revenge on her friend, after Renae finally broke up with her. Camila was painfully obsessed with Renae but couldn't have her, so she lured her into this online relationship and created a male version of herself. Sadly, this cruel joke led to the death of a young girl. Currently, it is known that Camila got married, had a child, and is enjoying life. The woman finally decided to partner with a man as she realized same-sex romances were not truly her destiny.